Hi, I'm Charles Gandy, and today I'd like to show you my new pattern that I've written for Castone Magazine for the series of articles that I've been doing called Confident Beginner. This is called my first shawl, and it is, as you can see, a triangular shawl that is made with a series of garter stitch ridges and stockinette ridges. Garter stitch meaning you knit every row, stockinette stitches meaning you knit one row and purl one row. In addition to the 11 bands of alternating garter stitch and stockinette, there are several things about this shawl that I think you'll find interesting. First of all, we're going to be talking about this 3-stitch garter stitch edge that we're going to do there. I'm going to talk about how to make an increase using a yarn over, which becomes a decorative increase that gives you that nice decorative hole in your work. We're going to do 4 of those increases on every row, one at the edge, one on either side of the central spine, and then one on the other edge. So 1, 2, 3, 4 increases. I'm going to talk about this interesting central spine with that elongated stitch that you see there. And then finally, I'm going to talk about how you close this up. So there's a lot to be learned in this very simple pattern, but one that I think you can gain a lot from. So let's get started with a little knitting here. You see here I've cast on 7 stitches down here, and oops, it looks like I dropped a stitch there. I'll show you how I picked that up when I get there. But we cast on 7 stitches, and I've worked 3 or 4 rows of garter stitch already, and I've started doing my yarn over increases. There are a couple of things that I want to point out here. You notice that I have 3 markers on this needle. The first marker is a green marker, and I've done that on purpose because green is a marker, a color of marker that I use at the beginning of a row or a round, and that says to me, go. It's the only time I ever use a green marker is at the beginning of a row or a round. The other 2 markers are different colors. I place these markers here to help me. They're kind of like road maps. They're kind of like road signs. They keep me on target with my pattern as I'm going. So if you'll see here, I have this set up with 3 stitches for my garter stitch edge here, and 3 stitches for my garter stitch edge there, and then the garter stitch bands are starting to work there, and I took out a row there, and I let that stitch there fall off the needle, so I'll fix that when I get to it. So let's get started here. We're going to begin by working these 3 stitches as in the garter stitch pattern to create that edge. 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to slip that green marker, and now I'm going to make my first of 4 increases, and this increase is a simple yarn over increase. I'm simply going to bring the yarn from the back of my work to the front of the work, almost as though I were going to purl, but instead of purling, I'm going to knit the next stitch. And do you see that that has created a hole or a yarn over there? Then the pattern says to continue to the 1 stitch before the marker. And of course I have dropped that stitch, so I've got to pick up that thing. Maybe it's okay that I've done that. Everybody makes mistakes no matter how long you've been knitting, and I certainly made that one. So look, I'm going to come in here and pick up that stitch that I dropped from before. So now I'm at the point that the pattern says 1 stitch before the marker. I'm there. I'm going to make my second increase by making another yarn over. But this time, instead of knitting this stitch, I'm going to slip this stitch. And this is making that elongated stitch that's the spine of this triangular shawl. I'm going to slip this stitch purlwise, as though I were going to purl it. You can also slip a stitch knitwise. In this case, I'm slipping it purlwise, simply moving it from the left needle to the right needle. The reason I do it purlwise is because I'm not going to do anything else with that stitch once I've slipped it. If I were going to do a decrease of some kind, an SSK or a slip 1, knit 1, pass slip stitch over, if I was going to manipulate that stitch, instead of slipping it as if to purl, I would slip it as if to knit. If I slip it as if to purl and do that decrease, it will twist the stitch. I hope that's not too much information, but that's a very technical and important thing for you to learn about when and where and how to slip stitches. So I slipped that stitch. I now slip the marker. Now I need to make my 3rd increase by simply yarning over again. There's my yarn over, and now I'm going to knit to the next marker. knit to the next marker. And then I'm going to do the last of the 4 yarn overs, bringing it forward again, slip the marker, and knit 3, 2, 3. Now I'm going to turn the work, and since I'm working on a garter stitch ridge, we're going to knit most of these stitches for this. If I were on the stockinette rows, I would then purl most of those stitches. All of that's in the pattern, so don't panic about that. But we're going to start every row by knitting 3 on every row, regardless of which pattern, whether you're doing stockinette or garter. We slipped the marker. Now look, there is that yarn over. So I just simply knit into that yarn over, and that creates that hole. Then I come ahead across here. The pattern says knit to the marker. So I'm going to knit to that marker. And then this is a little tricky here. I knit to the marker, but look, there's my yarn over before the marker. Make sure you just knit into that. Then I slip the marker. Now this is where you have to be careful, because you see how that yarn over needs to fall on the outside of that stitch, but sometimes that yarn over wants to come forward. You need to make sure that it's on the inside, and the pattern says to purl one. That's that stitch we slipped before. So I'm going to purl that stitch right after the marker. Then I'm going to take my yarn back and I'm going to knit that yarn over. So be very careful at that marker that you do a purl stitch right after the marker and a knit stitch into the yarn over. So now we will continue to the end of that row, and we've got one more yarn over to resolve, and that's the last stitch before the marker. And you'll see there it is. So I just knit into that. I slip my marker, and then I knit those last 3 stitches for my garter stitch edge. Now then you can see here, when I turn this over here, you're supposed to do 16 rows of garter stitch and 16 rows of stockinette stitch. You can count these holes here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each one of those holes, those yarn overs, represents 2 rows. So that tells you that I have done 8 rows in my 16 row count. One last thing I want to show you in this, you see here down these stitches here, when I finish this and I have blocked it, I'm going to then take a tapestry needle and I'm going to close up that gap of where I cast on those stitches by simply running a tapestry needle through those stitches there. And you will see here that once I've done that on the real thing, that garter stitch tab or garter stitch edging continues on there. So I hope that this helps you to see how you can make this beautiful scarf, beautiful shawl. The good news about it is you can make it as big or as small as you want by how many of these ridges you do. In the pattern, I call for 11 of them, alternating between the garter and the stockinette. But you could do 14, or you could do as many or as few as you wanted to do. I do think it's nice to start and stop with a garter stitch, because that kind of finishes off the edges. But I hope that helps you, and happy knitting.